The night was unusually cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you shiver even inside a thick coat. I remember standing at the edge of the docks on Oak Island, staring at the dark water that stretched endlessly before me. Fog curled across the surface, hiding whatever secrets lay beneath. I had always heard rumors about the island, whispers of hidden treasures, coded messages, and forbidden journeys. But nothing had prepared me for the story I was about to uncover. It began with a letter. A fragile piece of parchment, yellowed with age, delivered to me in a nondescript envelope. No return address. No signature. Just a few cryptic words. The Sinclair voyage holds the truth. Find it before it finds you. At first, I thought it was a prank. Oak Island was famous for attracting thrill-seekers and treasure hunters who loved to play tricks. But something about the handwriting, precise, deliberate, almost ceremonial, told me this was different. Real. Dangerous. I spent days trying to trace the letter, to find out who sent it. Every lead brought me back to one name. Sinclair. Not the Sinclair I had heard of in casual history books. Not some fictionalized adventurer. This was a man who had lived in the shadows of history. A man whose journey had been erased from public records, yet whose impact had rippled across centuries. According to fragmented documents, he had sailed to Oak Island in the early 1800s. But why? And why did so many powerful men seem intent on keeping his story buried? The more I read, the more the story consumed me. Sinclair had been obsessed with codes. Not simple puzzles or riddles, but complex, layered codes left by the Templars centuries before. Some said these codes led to unimaginable treasures. Others whispered darker truths, secrets that could challenge the foundations of history itself. I could feel my pulse quicken as I held the first of Sinclair's notes in my hands. The ink was faded, the edges torn, but the symbols were unmistakable. Whoever had written them had wanted only one person to understand. And somehow, I had been chosen. I knew I couldn't wait. The letter's warning echoed in my mind. Find it before it finds you. I packed lightly, notebooks, pencils, a camera, and some supplies. Anything more would slow me down. I booked passage on a small ferry that would take me to the island at dawn. The boat rocked gently as we left the mainland, the shoreline disappearing behind me like a memory fading into fog. I felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Fear because I didn't know what awaited me, and excitement because I was about to uncover something no one had seen in centuries. By the time we approached Oak Island, the sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in muted shades of orange and gray. The island looked peaceful from a distance. Quiet. Undisturbed. But I knew better. The silence was part of the trap. Secrets, I had learned, thrived in quiet places. They waited for the curious, the persistent, and the reckless. The first clue I found on the shore was subtle, almost laughably simple. A series of faint markings carved into a wooden post. At first, they looked like scratches, random and meaningless. But when I compared them to Sinclair's notes, my heart raced. They matched a symbol he had drawn repeatedly, a triangle encircled by 3 smaller triangles, each pointing in a different direction. It was a code, a guide, a warning. And it was my first real connection to the man whose journey had been erased from history. As I followed the markings inland, I noticed signs of previous explorers. Footprints half covered by leaves, pieces of broken tools, and a few scattered notebooks, some still containing notes in the old, precise handwriting of Sinclair himself. It felt as though the island had been waiting for me, waiting to reveal its secrets. But with each step, I also felt eyes watching me. Not just the wind rustling through the trees, not just the occasional bird overhead. No, it was something else. Something human. I couldn't see anyone, but the feeling of being observed grew stronger. Night fell faster than I expected. Shadows stretched across the dense forest, and the fog returned, thicker this time. I set up a small camp near what appeared to be a natural clearing. The fire was barely enough to keep the chill away, but it provided a sense of security. I pulled out Sinclair's notes again and tried to make sense of them. The codes were intricate, layering numbers, letters, and symbols that didn't seem to follow any conventional logic. But there was a pattern. And patterns, I reminded myself, were never random. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every sound, the crackle of the fire, the distant splash of water, the whisper of wind through the trees, made me flinch. I thought about the warnings I had read in old journals, about treasure hunters disappearing without a trace, about men driven mad by the secrets they uncovered. And yet, despite the fear, a strange calm settled over me. I was part of something bigger than myself. Something that had been hidden for centuries, waiting for someone patient and determined enough to find it. Before I closed my eyes, I traced the symbols in the dirt one last time. Triangle encircled by 3 smaller triangles. Directions hidden within directions. The first step of Sinclair's journey was no longer just a story. It was real. And I was standing in it. Somewhere out there, I knew, the dark past of Oak Island was watching, waiting, ready to reveal the first of its secrets. But I also knew one thing. This journey would not be easy, and the deeper I went, the more danger I would face. Not from the island itself, but from the shadows that had guarded Sinclair's secrets for centuries. And so, with a mix of fear, curiosity, and determination, I took my first steps into the heart of Oak Island's dark past. The first light of morning on Oak Island didn't bring peace. It brought clarity and danger. I had slept fitfully, the fire burning low, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the ground. When I woke, the fog had lifted slightly, but the air was still thick with mystery. I packed my small camp, leaving no trace behind. Every step I took felt like walking deeper into history itself, deeper into a story that had been hidden for centuries. The symbols I had traced the night before stayed in my mind. Triangle encircled by 3 smaller triangles. Directions hidden within directions. I realized quickly that this was more than a simple map. It was a challenge, a test. Sinclair hadn't left his trail for anyone to follow casually. It demanded patience, intelligence, and a willingness to confront danger. As I moved inland, the forest began to thin, revealing signs of human activity long abandoned. Broken tools, rusted hinges, and half-buried stones arranged in peculiar patterns. One arrangement caught my attention immediately, a line of stones forming a crude arrow, pointing toward the dense part of the forest. It matched a pattern I had seen in Sinclair's notes, a symbol indicating forward, but with caution. I followed the arrow, my footsteps quiet on the damp ground. Every so often, I paused to check my surroundings. The island had a way of making you feel alone, yet watched. I couldn't see anyone, yet sometimes I felt the brush of movement just beyond my vision. Perhaps it was just nerves. Perhaps it was something else. Something that had been guarding Sinclair's secrets for hundreds of years. Hours passed, and the symbols led me to a small, overgrown clearing. At the center was a shallow depression in the earth, almost invisible beneath the leaves. I knelt and brushed them aside, uncovering a flat stone slab. It was carved with symbols, intricate and deliberate. Some were familiar, triangles, circles, intersecting lines, but others were entirely new, unlike anything in Sinclair's notes. I traced the carvings with my fingers, my pulse quickening. This was it. The first major clue left by Sinclair himself. But as I studied the symbols, I realized that they were not just a message. They were a warning. One symbol, more prominent than the others, resembled a hand reaching upward, surrounded by smaller marks that seemed to indicate danger or death. Whoever had made this wanted to make sure that any intruder understood the risk. I took photographs, copied the symbols into my notebook, and tried to interpret them. Sinclair had been clever, leaving multiple layers of meaning. The triangles pointed toward specific directions. The circles indicated measurement. And the hand. It was clear that some part of this journey had already claimed lives. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I was not just exploring history. I was stepping into a path where others had failed, vanished, or been silenced. The deeper I went, the more I realized how dangerous this expedition could be. And yet, I couldn't stop. The sense of purpose was overwhelming. Every rustle in the trees, every distant splash in the water, felt like the island itself urging me forward. I knew that Sinclair had faced the same tension. Fear, curiosity, and determination all mixed together in a way that left him both vulnerable and relentless. Late in the afternoon, I found what I had been unconsciously looking for: remnants of a structure, half buried by time and neglect. The stones were shaped unnaturally, stacked with intention, and some bore symbols matching Sinclair's. I ran my hands over them, imagining the Templars who had built this place centuries ago, and Sinclair, a man determined to uncover what they had hidden. The connection across time was almost palpable, like a bridge reaching from the past directly to me. But with discovery came realization. The structure was only part of the puzzle. There were hidden chambers, secret compartments, pathways designed to confuse anyone unprepared. And then I saw it, a partially covered entrance, almost invisible, leading underground. I paused. The air smelled faintly of damp stone and something older, something human. My heart raced. This was not just a discovery. This was the threshold of what Sinclair had been chasing. I debated for a moment. Descend into the unknown now, or wait and prepare better. But hesitation was not part of this story. Sinclair had never hesitated, and neither could I. I lit a small lantern, its glow flickering across the stone walls, and slowly stepped down into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, forcing me to crouch, and the walls were carved with symbols that made my stomach tighten. Triangle, circle, hand, and something new, a line of dots that seemed to pulse almost like a heartbeat. It was as if the past was alive, warning me, challenging me, daring me to continue. I moved carefully, the light from the lantern casting long shadows that danced eerily across the walls. Every step echoed, magnified in the tight space, reminding me how alone I was. And yet, there was something comforting in the solitude, something that whispered, "You are not the first. You are not the last. But you may be the one to succeed." Hours must have passed. I could feel it in my bones. Then, finally, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. And what I saw made my breath catch. Artifacts, strange and ancient, scattered across the stone floor. Pieces of parchment, some burned at the edges, others still intact, and tools that no one had touched for centuries. It was a time capsule of history, hidden from the world, waiting for someone persistent enough to find it. And at the center, almost like a guardian of the chamber, was a pedestal. On it lay a single leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. The initials were faintly embossed. J. S. Sinclair. My hands trembled as I reached for it, aware that I was holding a fragment of history that had been erased, almost lost forever. As I opened the journal, I realized the enormity of what I had uncovered. Not just the story of a man, not just the journey, but the secrets of Oak Island itself. Secrets so powerful, so carefully hidden, that they had shaped the actions of men for centuries. And yet, the deeper I read, the more I sensed that this was only the beginning. Sinclair's journey was far from over, and by stepping into it, I had joined him. I looked around the chamber, the weight of history pressing down on me. The journal contained maps, coded messages, and notes about the Templars, warnings of danger, hints at treasure, and references to a hidden force that had protected these secrets for generations. Every word seemed to pull me further in, urging me to continue, promising revelations and risks in equal measure. And in that quiet, dimly lit chamber, I realized something chilling. I was not alone. Somewhere beyond the walls, I could hear a faint sound, movement, deliberate and soft, as if someone had been waiting for me. The journal trembled slightly in my hands. I froze. Whoever had left these secrets had planned for seekers like me. And now, centuries later, the game had begun again. I had crossed the threshold into history, mystery, and danger. And there was no turning back. The chamber was silent, except for the faint sound of my own breathing. My fingers lingered on the leather cover of Sinclair's journal, feeling the weight of history pressed against me. I hesitated before opening it further. I knew that inside were not just words, but warnings, maps, and secrets powerful enough to change the way people thought about Oak Island. Secrets that had been protected for centuries. Opening the journal was like stepping into another time. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and surprisingly modern for its age. The first entries spoke of Sinclair's preparations, of his obsession with codes left behind by the Templars, and of his mission to uncover what had been hidden so carefully. He wrote of a mysterious land beyond, a place connected to Oak Island, where the ultimate secret lay. Every sentence drew me further into his mind, into the urgency and danger that had driven him forward. But then I came across the first warning. A line scribbled in ink darker than the rest, almost as if he had shaken his hand while writing it. Some secrets are protected by more than time. Beware the eyes that never sleep. My pulse quickened. The shadows in the chamber felt heavier. The words were not just cautionary. They were alive. Whoever had protected this place had not left lightly. And I knew without a doubt that someone or something was still guarding these secrets. I spent hours decoding the first series of Templar symbols. Triangles, circles, lines, and dots intertwined in complex patterns. At first, they seemed indecipherable, but as I compared them to the clues I had seen outside the chamber, a pattern emerged. The symbols pointed to a location deeper on the island, a hidden tunnel, concealed beneath the forest floor, and possibly leading to the land beyond Sinclair had mentioned. The idea made my stomach twist with excitement and fear. I didn't notice the subtle shift in the air until it was almost too late. A faint sound echoed behind me, a scuff of a foot, the brush of fabric against stone. My lantern flickered as if reacting to the presence. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again. Someone was moving in the chamber with me. My mind raced. Had I imagined it? Was it one of the many treasure hunters who came to Oak Island seeking glory? Or was it something older, something guarding Sinclair's secrets through time? I held the journal close and moved slowly toward the side of the chamber, pressing myself against the wall. My eyes darted across the shadows. And then I saw it. A figure partially obscured by darkness, watching me from the entrance to a narrow tunnel. They didn't move quickly. They didn't speak. They just observed, silent and patient, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Who's there?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure didn't answer. Instead, they slowly backed into the shadows, disappearing from view. My heart was pounding in my chest. I knew this wasn't the first time someone had tried to stop Sinclair, and it wouldn't be the last. Whoever this was, they had waited centuries for seekers like me. And now I had stepped right into their path. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The journal was heavy in my hands, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me. Sinclair had faced this same danger. He had trusted the codes, followed the symbols, and pressed forward despite every warning. I had to do the same. With careful steps, I moved toward the tunnel the figure had been guarding. It was narrow, barely wide enough to squeeze through, and the walls were slick with damp stone. Inside the tunnel, I could feel the weight of history pressing down. Every scratch on the walls, every carved symbol, every faint echo of footsteps told a story of those who had come before me. Some had vanished without a trace. Others had returned with madness in their eyes. And Sinclair? He had left a trail for a reason, a careful path to follow, and perhaps a way to survive where others had failed. I kept the journal open, tracing symbols as I went. Some were simple directions. Left at the third carved mark, right at the broken stone. Others were warnings. Do not disturb the central chamber, lest you awaken what protects it. I didn't fully understand every word, but I trusted the pattern, and I trusted myself to move carefully. Every step felt heavier, as if the island itself were testing me. Hours passed in the tunnel, and the light from my lantern flickered weakly against the walls. Then I reached a point where the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, one that seemed untouched for centuries. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the smell of earth and stone mixed with something metallic, faint but distinct. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could make out the outlines of objects. Crates, old tools, and a large, covered shape in the center. I approached cautiously, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. The first major artifact of Sinclair's journey, hidden for generations. I pulled back the covering, and my breath caught. It wasn't gold, or jewels, or anything I expected. It was a large, intricately carved chest, bound with iron and etched with the same Templar symbols I had been decoding. The craftsmanship was exquisite. Whoever had built it had taken care to protect it not just with locks, but with meaning, each symbol a layer of the puzzle. As I examined the chest, the sound returned, soft, deliberate, coming from the entrance to the chamber. I wasn't alone. Whoever had been following me had found me. My pulse quickened, and a cold sweat formed on my forehead. I had to think quickly. Do I try to open the chest now, risking confrontation? Or do I hide and wait for the intruder to pass? I made a decision. I opened the journal to the last set of symbols Sinclair had written before this chamber, tracing them carefully with my finger. They described a sequence, a combination of movements, placements, and incantations, almost ritualistic. It felt eerie, but I followed them step by step. The chest clicked. One layer opened. Then another. And then, finally, the lid lifted, revealing its contents. Inside were artifacts unlike anything I had ever seen. Small metallic objects with inscriptions in a language I couldn't read, delicate scrolls preserved in wax and cloth, and a single folded map. The map seemed to indicate the next stage of Sinclair's journey, the path to the land beyond. But as I reached for it, the intruder stepped into the chamber. This time, I saw them clearly. A figure in dark, worn clothing, face obscured, standing still yet radiating intent. And their voice, calm but firm, echoed across the stone walls. You shouldn't be here. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Why are you following Sinclair? I froze. The words weren't a threat. They were a test. And I realized at that moment that the true danger of Oak Island wasn't just the physical traps or hidden codes. It was the people, the guardians of its secrets, who had waited for centuries to challenge anyone daring enough to uncover the truth. I held the journal tightly, my mind racing. This was only the beginning. Sinclair's journey had led me here, but it would take courage, intelligence, and luck to continue. And I knew one thing for certain. The deeper I went, the closer I came to truths that powerful men, for centuries, had fought to keep hidden. And in that quiet, tension-filled chamber, I realized that my journey had become more than history. It had become survival. The chamber was silent except for the faint drip of water from somewhere deep in the stone walls. The intruder's gaze was steady, unreadable, yet intense. I held the journal tightly, unsure if it was enough to justify my presence. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing off the stone like a warning. You shouldn't be here, the figure repeated, voice calm, almost hypnotic. This isn't a place for curiosity. It's a place for those who understand. Do you? I swallowed hard. I'm following Sinclair, I said, trying to sound confident. I mean no harm. I just want to understand. To finish what he started. The figure studied me for a long moment. I felt like time itself had slowed, the air thickening, each second stretching into an eternity. Then, slowly they nodded. Not in approval, but in acknowledgement. Sinclair trusted no one, they said. And yet, here you are. The island has chosen to test you, as it tested him. The path ahead is not easy. There are rules, codes, that must be followed, or you will fail. I nodded, trying to steady my shaking hands. The journal felt heavier now, as though the weight of Sinclair's journey pressed down on me. I knew this was no longer just history or mystery. This was a test of endurance, intelligence, and courage. The intruder gestured toward the chest I had just opened. What you hold there is only the beginning. The map points to the next stage. But you must understand it fully. One wrong step, one misinterpreted symbol, and the consequences will be severe. I unfolded the map, its edges brittle, the ink faded but surprisingly legible. Lines crisscrossed the page, intersecting with symbols that matched those in Sinclair's journal. There were numbers, letters, triangles, and circles, all layered together. It was clear that the map was not just a guide, it was a puzzle. And I realized, with a chill running down my spine, that the island itself was a living puzzle. Every path, every hidden chamber, every symbol had been designed to test those brave enough to enter. "Follow me," the intruder said abruptly, turning toward a narrow passageway at the back of the chamber. "I will show you the first clue outside the tunnel. But understand this, the island watches, and it does not forgive mistakes." I hesitated, unsure if I could trust them. But there was no other choice. With a deep breath, I followed, my lantern casting flickering shadows across the rough stone walls. As we moved, the intruder spoke without looking back. "Sinclair discovered something," they said, their voice low. "Something the Templars left behind. A secret they would kill to protect. He decoded part of it before he disappeared. What you have in your hands is only the first layer. To reach the truth, you must follow the rules exactly, or the island itself will punish you." We emerged from the tunnel into a part of the forest I hadn't seen before. The fog had returned, curling around the trees like a living thing. The intruder pointed to a large stone, partially buried and covered in moss. Carved into its surface were symbols, triangles within triangles, lines connecting dots, and a circle enclosing what looked like a hand. "This," they said, "is the first marker outside the chamber. Sinclair used it to navigate safely. You must understand it fully before moving forward." I knelt and traced the carvings with my finger, comparing them to the symbols in the journal. Slowly, the pattern emerged. The triangles indicated direction. The lines connected points of interest. The circle enclosing the hand was a warning: do not proceed without preparation. I realized then that Sinclair's journey was not just about following symbols. It was about understanding intention. Each mark, each line, each subtle detail conveyed meaning that could save or endanger a life. The intruder watched silently, letting me work. Then, after what felt like hours, I finally traced the last line. It pointed toward a small clearing in the distance, partially obscured by trees. According to the map and journal, this was the next step, a hidden chamber that Sinclair had discovered but never fully explored. "Good," the intruder said quietly. "You understand enough to proceed. But remember this, the island does not forgive arrogance. Move carefully, and trust the symbols. Do not rush. The rules are ancient, and they are deadly if ignored." I nodded, feeling the weight of their words settle in my chest. The forest seemed alive around me, the fog thickening, shadows stretching unnaturally, and the faintest sounds of movement whispering just beyond my vision. Every instinct told me to proceed with caution. Every fiber of my being was alert, ready for the unexpected. As I approached the clearing, I noticed the remnants of an old structure, a stone foundation, barely visible under decades of overgrowth. Sinclair's map indicated a hidden entrance somewhere beneath it, possibly leading to an underground chamber. I knelt, brushing aside leaves and debris, revealing a narrow stone hatch. It was worn, almost invisible, but the markings matched those in the journal perfectly. I paused, holding my breath. The intruder stayed at the edge of the clearing, silent but present, watching, judging. I opened the hatch slowly, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. The smell of earth and stone drifted up, mixed with a faint metallic tang. I took a deep breath and began my descent, lantern in hand, journal clutched to my chest. The ladder ended in a small underground chamber. The walls were carved with symbols, similar to those I had seen before, but more intricate. Triangles within circles, lines connecting points in patterns that seemed almost alive. I realized that this was not just a tunnel or a room. It was a protective mechanism, a puzzle designed to test the seeker. Only those who understood the symbols fully could proceed safely. As I studied the carvings, I noticed something new, a sequence of numbers and letters hidden within the design, almost like a code layered beneath the visible symbols. Sinclair had written about this in his journal, referring to it as a key to the land beyond. I traced the sequence carefully, feeling a thrill of recognition. I was on the right path. But then, a sound from above made me freeze. The faint scrape of stone, deliberate and slow. Someone was moving on the surface, near the clearing. I didn't know if it was the intruder, or someone else entirely. Whoever it was, I knew they were aware of my presence. And I realized with a sudden chill, that the island's guardians were closer than I had ever imagined. The chamber was silent again, save for my breathing and the faint dripping of water. I knew I had to focus. Sinclair's journey had brought me this far, and now it was my turn to continue. Every symbol, every warning, every rule had a purpose. And I understood that ignoring even one could have consequences I was not prepared to face. I opened the journal again, tracing the code against the carvings on the walls. Slowly, the meaning became clear. It was a combination of direction, timing, and understanding the intention behind each mark. I could almost hear Sinclair's voice guiding me, urging me to proceed with care. And then, as I prepared to move deeper into the chamber, I realized something chilling. The journey ahead was not just about uncovering history. It was about survival. The deeper I went, the more I understood that Oak Island's secrets were alive, and those who sought them without respect or understanding would not leave unscathed. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, lantern held high, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The land beyond, Sinclair's ultimate secret, was closer than ever. And I knew that every step I took would test not only my intellect, but my courage, my resolve, and my very will to survive. The underground chamber was colder than I expected. The damp stone walls seemed to absorb the faint light of my lantern, swallowing it into shadows that shifted with every flicker. I took a slow, steadying breath, aware that one misstep could cost me more than just the next clue. Oak Island had a way of punishing impatience, and I could feel that danger in every echo around me. The carvings on the walls were intricate, more so than anything I had seen before. Triangles, circles, lines, and dots overlapped in complex layers, some etched deeper than others. Sinclair's journal had warned me, the land beyond is protected by rules older than kings. Read carefully. Move deliberately. I traced the patterns slowly, following his instructions to the letter. Each symbol, each sequence, revealed a path forward. And yet, there was still a sense of something watching. I moved cautiously across the chamber, lantern in hand. The floor was uneven, stones slick with moisture, and small cracks hinted at hidden pitfalls. It felt as though the chamber itself was testing me, demanding patience and attention. I recalled the intruder's words from earlier, "The island does not forgive arrogance." I understood now that every symbol, every line, was designed not just to guide but to protect. Protect what, I didn't yet know, but the weight of centuries pressed down on me. At the far end of the chamber, I found a raised platform, roughly square, with an iron-bound chest resting atop it. This was no ordinary chest. Its surface was engraved with Templar symbols, more elaborate than any I had seen before. Circles nested within triangles, lines connecting points that seemed to move as I shifted my gaze, and a symbol I hadn't encountered previously, a serpent coiled around a sun. I traced it lightly with my fingers, sensing the deliberate care in its craftsmanship. I opened Sinclair's journal again and compared the symbols. There it was, a note describing the serpent and sun symbol as a key to unlock the chest's contents. Balance, Sinclair had written. Day and night, light and shadow, life and death. Only those who understand duality may see what lies within. The words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about treasure. This was about understanding a philosophy, a code, and a purpose carefully concealed for centuries. I hesitated before attempting to open the chest. The air in the chamber seemed to thrum with anticipation. My hands trembled slightly as I followed Sinclair's instructions, aligning the symbols according to the journal's guidance. Slowly, deliberately, I pressed the points, twisted the iron latches, and shifted the serpent in alignment with the sun. A deep click echoed through the chamber. The chest creaked open. Inside were several artifacts, each more fascinating than the last. Small metallic objects etched with indecipherable runes, scrolls carefully wrapped in oilcloth, and a small ornate key, unlike anything I had ever seen. But it was the final item that made my pulse race. A folded parchment, marked with a map that seemed to indicate a location beyond Oak Island itself, the land beyond Sinclair had been chasing all his life. The map was cryptic. It depicted not just land, but symbols marking paths, dangers, and safe points. The details suggested Sinclair had traveled extensively, mapping a hidden route few could comprehend. I traced the lines with my finger, feeling the weight of centuries pressing on my shoulders. This wasn't just a map. It was a puzzle, a guide, and a warning, all rolled into one. As I studied the artifacts, I became aware of a sound, a low, deliberate scraping coming from the far end of the chamber. I froze. The intruder? Or another guardian of Sinclair's secrets? My pulse quickened. I couldn't risk panic, couldn't let fear dictate my actions. Slowly, I picked up the journal and the map, keeping the artifacts close to my chest, and moved toward the far wall. There, almost invisible, was a narrow passage, partially concealed by shadows. It matched markings on the map, the path forward. As I stepped into it, the chamber behind me seemed to settle, as if the artifacts had been satisfied with my care in handling them. The passage was tight, forcing me to crouch, and the air grew colder, heavier, tinged with the scent of earth and something metallic, blood, perhaps, left long ago by seekers who had failed. I moved carefully, lantern held high. The symbols continued along the walls, now more subtle, etched in ways that required careful attention to notice. One misreading could lead to a hidden pit or collapse. I realized then that Sinclair's journey wasn't simply physical. It was mental, intellectual, spiritual. Only those who could interpret the signs correctly would survive, and perhaps only those who respected the history could reach the land beyond. Hours passed. The passage wound deeper, turning into a spiral staircase carved into stone. My muscles ached, my knees protested, and yet I pressed on. The deeper I went, the more I felt the weight of the past pressing on me. And then, I reached a landing. A small chamber opened before me, almost ceremonial in design. Symbols were carved in a circular pattern on the floor, echoing the serpent and sun motif from the chest. In the center was a pedestal, empty. And yet, the energy in the room was palpable. I could feel it pressing against my chest, urging me forward. This was a place of purpose, a nexus of Sinclair's journey, and a threshold to the land beyond. I knew without a doubt that the next step would test me in ways the previous challenges hadn't. I took a deep breath, holding the map and journal tightly. Every instinct told me to proceed carefully. Every story I had read, every warning Sinclair had written, every step I had taken brought me here. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the chamber, eyes were watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I traced the circular symbols on the floor with my fingers, trying to interpret their meaning. Slowly, patterns emerged. Alignments, directions, a sequence of steps that needed to be followed precisely. And as I began to move in accordance with the design, I realized the chamber was more than a room. It was a key, a mechanism that would either grant access to the next stage or punish failure severely. And then, as I completed the first sequence, the floor beneath the pedestal shifted slightly, revealing a narrow stairway descending further into darkness. My heart raced. This was it, the final gateway, the threshold to the land beyond Sinclair had sought for decades. I could feel centuries of history converging here, secrets protected, knowledge hidden, and dangers waiting for anyone bold enough to step forward. With a deep breath, I descended, lantern in hand, every sense alert, aware that the journey had just entered its most perilous stage. The land beyond awaited, and Sinclair's secrets were mine to uncover, if I could survive the trials that still lay ahead. The stairway seemed endless, spiraling downward into a darkness so complete that even my lantern's light barely reached the edges. Each step echoed, a hollow reminder that the path Sinclair had carved centuries before was still as dangerous as ever. My legs ached, my fingers ached from gripping the journal and the map, but I pressed on. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the threshold to the land beyond. When I finally reached the bottom, I found myself in a massive underground cavern. The air was cooler here, heavy with moisture and the scent of ancient stone. Stalactites hung like frozen daggers from the ceiling, and shadows stretched across the walls in strange, shifting patterns. I could feel the weight of history pressing in from every direction. This wasn't just a chamber. It was a sanctuary. A place deliberately designed to protect something far greater than any treasure. The symbols on the walls were more complex than anything I had seen before. Triangles within circles, lines connecting distant points, and strange glyphs that seemed almost alive. I recognized some from Sinclair's journal, but others were entirely new, the work of a mind centuries ahead of its time, designed to challenge, confuse, and reward the patient. I studied the floor and realized it was a giant puzzle in itself. Circular stone slabs, each etched with a different symbol, were arranged in a pattern I couldn't immediately decipher. According to the journal, stepping on the wrong slab could trigger a trap, a hidden pit, a collapsing wall, or worse. I traced the map, comparing the positions of the slabs with Sinclair's notes, and slowly began to understand the sequence. Step 1. The triangle pointing north. Step 2. The circle with the hand. Step 3. The serpent coiled around the sun. Each step required precision, intuition, and trust in the symbols. I felt my pulse quicken. One wrong move and I could end up like the countless others who had vanished on this island. As I moved carefully across the floor, the cavern seemed to react. A faint hum resonated through the stone, growing louder with each step. The walls seemed to shimmer, as though acknowledging my progress, or perhaps warning me. I had no way to know. I trusted Sinclair's guidance, trusting the centuries-old code more than my own instincts. Halfway across, I noticed a small alcove, almost hidden, containing a pedestal. On it lay a single object, a golden medallion, etched with symbols that matched those in the journal. I recognized it instantly. A Templar relic, a key to the land beyond. My hands trembled as I picked it up, feeling the cool metal pulse faintly under my touch. It was heavy, not with gold, but with significance, as if holding it connected me to Sinclair, to the Templars, and to the secrets they had protected for centuries. No sooner had I grasped the medallion than a low rumble reverberated through the cavern. The ground beneath me shivered. I froze. Somewhere in the darkness, a stone slab shifted, echoing like a distant drumbeat. I realized then that this cavern wasn't just a puzzle. It was alive, designed to respond to those who sought its secrets. Every action had consequence. Every movement mattered. I continued across the floor, carefully placing each step. When I reached the far side, the sequence completed perfectly. The final slab shifted, revealing a narrow passage beyond. I peered inside. Darkness stretched ahead, but I could sense something monumental waiting at the end. The map in my hands confirmed it, the land beyond. The ultimate goal of Sinclair's journey, centuries in the making. But before I could step forward, a sound echoed from the entrance I had come through, deliberate, careful footsteps. I froze. Someone had followed me this far. The intruder? Or another guardian of the island's secrets? I held the medallion tightly, ready to defend myself, though I wasn't sure if it was enough. A figure emerged from the shadows, hooded and silent. "You shouldn't have come this far," they said, voice calm but full of authority. "Many have tried to reach this place. Few have succeeded. Do you understand what you are about to face?" I nodded, though fear coiled tightly in my chest. I know I must continue. I know Sinclair's journey is mine to finish. The figure stepped aside, motioning toward the passage. "Then go. But know this, the land beyond is not just a location. It is a test of character, of intellect, and of courage. Only those who understand the past, respect the rules, and face the truth can survive." With that, they disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone. I took a deep breath and stepped into the passage, feeling the walls close in around me. The air was colder here, denser, tinged with the scent of stone and earth long undisturbed. Every step echoed, every movement magnified. The medallion pulsed faintly in my hand, as if guiding me forward. The passage twisted and turned, eventually opening into a vast chamber. Unlike anything I had seen before, this room was enormous, with high vaulted ceilings and walls covered in Templar carvings. At the center was a raised platform, surrounded by concentric circles etched into the stone floor. I could feel the weight of history here, the presence of countless seekers who had come before me, some successful, most not. I approached the platform carefully. Symbols etched into the stone matched those in the journal, the map, and the medallion. Slowly, I placed the medallion on the center of the platform. A low hum filled the chamber, growing steadily until it resonated through my chest. The concentric circles glowed faintly, illuminating the carvings on the walls. I realized then that I was witnessing the mechanism of the land beyond, a system designed to protect, guide, and reveal, all at once. The hum grew louder, and the floor beneath the platform shifted slightly. A hidden compartment opened, revealing an artifact unlike anything I could have imagined, a small, intricately carved box, covered in symbols and runes. It radiated importance, as if the knowledge it contained could alter history itself. My hands shook as I reached for it. And as I lifted the box, a sudden thought struck me. Sinclair had found this. But he had vanished before he could reveal it to the world. And now, centuries later, I was holding the culmination of his journey, the land beyond, and the truth it protected. I realized then that Oak Island was not just a place of treasure. It was a place of knowledge, power, and consequences. And I understood, with a chill down my spine, that some secrets were hidden not for greed, but for protection, for the balance of history itself. The journey was far from over. The land beyond awaited, and the choices I made now would determine whether I uncovered its full truth, or became another lost soul in Oak Island's dark past. The artifact rested in my hands like a heartbeat from the past, small but radiating importance. Every symbol etched into its surface seemed to pulse faintly, almost alive. The carvings matched patterns I had seen throughout Sinclair's journal, the medallion, and the underground chambers. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was the culmination of centuries of secrecy, a treasure not of gold, but of knowledge. I opened the box carefully. Inside were several delicate items, a series of scrolls written in a script I could barely decipher, a small crystalline object that refracted the lantern's light in strange patterns, and a metallic key with intricate engravings. I could feel the weight of Sinclair's intentions. Each item was purposeful, each a clue to the land beyond. And somewhere in these objects lay the answer to the ultimate secret. I unrolled the first scroll. The writing was meticulous, almost obsessive. Sinclair described the land beyond as not a single location, but a network of hidden chambers and tunnels connected to ancient Templar sites across the world. The journal detailed methods to navigate them, warnings of dangers, and codes that had to be understood in sequence. Reading it felt like stepping into Sinclair's mind, understanding his obsession, his fear, and his determination. But then I noticed something alarming: faint scratches across the scrolls, almost like someone had tried to erase or alter parts of the writing. My pulse quickened. Had the intruder or another guardian interfered? Were others aware I had reached this far? The journal and artifact were meant to be preserved, protected. Yet here I was, holding the culmination of a centuries-long journey, and I realized I was not the only one who had coveted it. I took a deep breath and focused on the crystalline object. When held in the lantern's light, it refracted into a pattern that mirrored the symbols etched into the floor of the chamber. The circles, triangles, and serpents appeared to align perfectly with the light, revealing a hidden path within the chamber itself. My eyes widened. This wasn't just an object. It was a guide, a key, a lens to decode the land beyond. Following the pattern, I traced the light projections across the walls. One alignment revealed a hidden doorway, cleverly concealed within the stone. My hands trembled as I pushed it open, revealing a narrow tunnel descending even deeper into the unknown. I paused, aware that every step from this point on would test not just my intelligence, but my courage. The air grew colder, thicker, and the faint metallic scent of centuries-old protection filled my nostrils. As I moved forward, the tunnel walls became lined with strange glyphs and diagrams. Some were clearly warnings, depicting traps or pitfalls. Others appeared instructional, guiding me through the chamber's mechanics. I realized that the land beyond was not simply a location. It was a series of tests, intellectual, physical, and spiritual. Every action would have consequence. Every misstep could be fatal. Then, I heard it, a low, deliberate sound from somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Footsteps. A voice. The cavern seemed to respond to my presence, amplifying every noise. I froze, listening. The sound stopped. I moved forward cautiously, heart hammering in my chest. The shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, twisting as I passed, giving the illusion that the space itself was alive. At the end of the tunnel, I found a massive stone door, covered in complex Templar carvings. Triangles within circles, serpents coiled around suns, lines connecting points in patterns that were almost impossible to follow. I traced my fingers along the engravings, matching them with the map and journal. Slowly, deliberately, I followed Sinclair's instructions, turning, pressing, and aligning the symbols with the crystalline object. A low hum filled the chamber as the door shifted. Cracks appeared along the stone, light from the previous chamber spilling into the darkness. And then, with a deep, resonant click, the door began to slide open. Beyond it lay another chamber, larger, more imposing, and unlike anything I had ever seen. Inside, the chamber's walls were lined with shelves of artifacts, scrolls, and objects that seemed impossibly old. Symbols glowed faintly, as if alive, casting light on the collection. At the center was a pedestal, holding a single object, a golden orb, intricately carved and engraved with what looked like a celestial map. I knew immediately this was the first shocking truth of Sinclair's journey, the discovery that had driven him further than anyone else had dared. The orb radiated importance, almost like it was alive, and I could feel the centuries of protection surrounding it. I approached cautiously, remembering the warnings of the intruder and Sinclair's journal. Respect the rules, read the symbols carefully, and never act recklessly. My hand trembled as I reached toward it. The moment I touched it, a vision flashed across my mind. Maps of hidden chambers, coded messages, and symbols connected to Templar sites worldwide. I staggered back, overwhelmed. This was more than a treasure. This was knowledge. Knowledge that had been hidden, guarded, and protected for centuries. And I realized the gravity of what I held. Sinclair had uncovered a secret that could reshape history, but it had come with danger, and possibly, a curse. The orb's energy seemed almost conscious, responding to my touch, aware that I was an intruder in a centuries-old story. And then I heard it again. Footsteps, deliberate and approaching. Someone or something had followed me into this chamber. I wasn't alone. The shadows in the corners seemed to move, stretching toward me, and I understood that the guardians of Sinclair's secret were closer than ever. I held the orb tightly, taking a deep breath. I had reached the first shocking truth of Sinclair's journey, but the challenges were only beginning. The land beyond demanded intelligence, courage, and respect. Every choice I made now would determine whether I could uncover the full secret, or whether I would become just another lost soul in Oak Island's dark past. With the orb in hand and the journal close to my chest, I prepared to face whatever was coming, knowing that my journey had entered its most perilous phase. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the cavern like a warning drum. My heart pounded in my chest as I tightened my grip on the golden orb. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting unnaturally as if the chamber itself was alive, aware of the intruder approaching. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Every instinct screamed danger, yet I knew there was no turning back. The figure emerged from the shadows, hooded and silent, but this time closer, deliberate. They moved with precision, almost ceremonial, their presence commanding attention. "I warned you," the voice said, calm yet filled with authority. "The land beyond is not for the unprepared. What you hold in your hands carries consequences beyond your understanding." "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm following Sinclair. I've come this far, and I need to see it through." The figure studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. But know this. The first trial has begun. The orb responds to knowledge, not strength. If you fail, the consequences will be severe." I glanced down at the orb, its surface etched with celestial maps and cryptic symbols. As I examined it, the golden light reflected from the carvings illuminated the carvings on the walls in a new way. Lines connected in patterns I hadn't noticed before. Symbols that had seemed meaningless before now aligned perfectly with the orb's markings. I realized the orb was a key, not to open a door, but to decode the chamber itself. The floor beneath the pedestal began to shift, revealing a hidden spiral staircase descending even further into darkness. A chill ran down my spine. This was no ordinary path. It was a trial, carefully designed to test anyone daring to follow Sinclair's journey. The intruder stepped back into the shadows, silently watching as I prepared to descend. I took a deep breath and started down the stairs, lantern in hand, orb clutched tightly to my chest. Each step echoed through the cavern, the sound magnified as though the space itself was alive. The walls were covered in symbols, more intricate than anything I had seen. Triangles, circles, serpents, suns. Every pattern seemed purposeful, deliberate, and connected to the orb's markings. At the bottom, I found a circular chamber, larger than any I had entered. The walls were carved with concentric rings of symbols, each layer more complex than the last. In the center was a raised platform with a shallow indentation, perfectly shaped for the orb. I approached cautiously. The moment I placed the orb on the platform, the chamber reacted. A low hum filled the space, vibrating through my bones. The concentric rings on the floor began to glow faintly, each symbol lighting up in sequence. The air felt alive, charged with energy, and I realized the chamber was a mechanism, a puzzle designed to reveal the next stage of Sinclair's journey. But the trial was not just about observation. As I watched, the floor shifted beneath my feet. Panels rotated, revealing hidden pits, narrow passages, and false paths. The symbols on the walls now had a dual purpose, guiding me while simultaneously testing my ability to interpret the orb's projections. One wrong move, and I could fall into a hidden trap. I traced the orb's projections against the carvings, moving cautiously. Each step had to match the alignment precisely. My pulse quickened as I navigated the shifting floor. The chamber seemed to react to my confidence, testing my patience, intelligence, and resolve. I could feel centuries of history pressing down, the energy of those who had come before, and the weight of Sinclair's mission. Halfway through the trial, I encountered the first major obstacle, a series of narrow platforms suspended over a pit that seemed to drop endlessly into darkness. The orb's projections highlighted a path, but the steps were barely wide enough for my feet. I inched forward, heart hammering, each movement deliberate. Below me, shadows moved as if alive, teasing my fear. One false step would end everything. I focused on the symbols, trusting Sinclair's guidance and the orb's light. Slowly, carefully, I crossed the platforms, feeling the chamber respond to my precision. When I reached the other side, I let out a long breath, my body trembling from adrenaline. But there was no time to rest. The chamber had more trials, more symbols, and more secrets waiting to be revealed. As I moved forward, I noticed something chilling, faint footprints in the dust of the chamber. Someone had been here recently, perhaps the intruder, perhaps another guardian. They had moved silently, observing, waiting. I realized that the land beyond was not only a test of intelligence but also of courage and awareness. I was not alone. At the far end of the chamber, a small alcove contained a pedestal holding a scroll. I approached cautiously, recognizing the symbols on the pedestal from Sinclair's journal. The scroll contained the first shocking revelation, a description of a hidden alliance between the Templars and early explorers of Oak Island, a secret network designed to protect knowledge and artifacts from those unworthy or unprepared. The implications were staggering. The Templars had hidden more than treasure. They had hidden knowledge, maps, and codes capable of reshaping history. And Sinclair had been the first to attempt to uncover it fully. Now, centuries later, I held the same responsibility, and the same danger. As I carefully unrolled the scroll, a sudden sound echoed behind me. The intruder, or someone else, had moved closer, silent as a shadow. My heart raced. Every lesson Sinclair had left behind, every symbol, every warning, had led to this moment. I realized that to survive and uncover the land beyond, I would need more than intelligence. I would need courage, patience, and a respect for the history that had been so carefully protected. The chamber's energy pulsed as I read the scroll, and I knew that the first trial of the land beyond had only just begun. The secrets Sinclair had sought were within reach, but the journey would test everything. My mind, my body, and my will to survive. And as the footsteps grew nearer, I understood something chilling. The guardians of Oak Island's dark past were patient, deliberate, and eternal. And they would allow nothing to be taken lightly. The chamber seemed to hold its breath as the footsteps grew closer. My hands shook slightly as I clutched the orb and the scroll. Every symbol, every projection, every piece of guidance from Sinclair's journal had led me here, to the heart of the land beyond. I knew the final trial awaited, the central puzzle that would reveal the ultimate secret Sinclair had sought for decades. I moved cautiously toward the center of the chamber. The concentric circles on the floor glowed faintly, responding to the orb in my hands. Symbols aligned perfectly as I traced the patterns with my fingers, following the instructions etched into the scroll. My pulse raced. Every step had to be precise. One mistake could trigger a trap, collapse a floor, or worse. Then I saw it, the central pedestal. Unlike any I had encountered before, it was massive, carved from stone and engraved with intricate patterns, spirals, and lines connecting symbols from every chamber I had explored. At its apex was a slot, perfectly sized for the golden orb. I approached slowly, aware that placing it incorrectly could have catastrophic consequences. I studied the pedestal carefully, comparing it to Sinclair's notes. Triangles needed to align with the outer circle, serpents coiled in specific directions, and suns had to face the chamber's light source. I positioned the orb meticulously, turning and rotating it until it fit perfectly. The chamber seemed to react instantly. The hum I had felt before swelled into a resonance that shook the walls, vibrating through my bones. Light filled the room, projected from the orb onto the walls and ceiling. Symbols and diagrams shimmered, creating a map of hidden tunnels, chambers, and passages that extended beyond Oak Island itself. I realized with awe that Sinclair had discovered a network, a global system of Templar sites connected to the land beyond. Knowledge, artifacts, and secrets had been preserved here for centuries, hidden from the world. But the revelation came with danger. The floor beneath the pedestal shifted, revealing a series of platforms suspended over an abyss. This was the final test. The orb's projections illuminated the path, but the platforms were narrow, precarious, and moving. I knew that one misstep would send me plummeting into the darkness. Taking a deep breath, I began to cross, stepping carefully according to the orb's guidance. Each platform moved slightly under my weight, and the shadows below seemed alive, threatening. My heart raced, adrenaline surging as I focused on each symbol, each alignment. The chamber was testing me, my intellect, my courage, and my respect for the Templar rules. Halfway across, I paused to catch my breath and examine the next projection. That's when I noticed a figure emerging from the shadows at the chamber's edge. The intruder had followed me. They didn't speak, merely watched, evaluating whether I could succeed. I understood then that this trial wasn't just physical. It was a test of character. Only those worthy, those who understood the history and the responsibility, would survive. I continued across the platforms, heart hammering, until I reached the far side. The final step brought me to another pedestal, smaller and simpler, with a shallow indentation for a scroll. I placed Sinclair's journal there carefully. The moment it touched the pedestal, the chamber responded. A hidden compartment opened, revealing the final artifact, a small, intricately carved box, its surface covered in celestial symbols, runes, and Templar insignias. I opened it slowly. Inside was a set of scrolls, maps, and documents detailing the land beyond, its history, the Templars' purpose, and the ultimate secret Sinclair had sought, a hidden archive containing knowledge that could reshape the understanding of Oak Island, the Templars, and the explorers who followed. It was not treasure in the conventional sense. It was knowledge, preserved through centuries, meant for those who could understand it. I realized the gravity of what I held. This was not just a story or a legend. This was proof of centuries of careful preservation, a truth hidden from the world. Sinclair had uncovered part of it, but he had vanished before revealing the whole. And now, centuries later, I had succeeded where he had paused. But the intruder remained at the chamber's edge. Finally they spoke. You have succeeded, but the land beyond is not meant for selfishness. The knowledge here is a responsibility. Protect it. Respect it. Reveal it wisely. I nodded, understanding. The chamber seemed to settle, the energy calming as though acknowledging my worthiness. The shadows retreated, the hum softened, and the symbols on the walls glowed faintly before fading. I had passed the final trial. I had uncovered Sinclair's ultimate secret. I took a deep breath, holding the orb, journal, and scrolls. The land beyond had tested me in ways I could never have imagined, intellectually, physically, and spiritually. I realized that the journey was never about treasure, but about understanding, courage, and respect for history. Sinclair's hidden karma, the legacy of the Templars, and the dangers of curiosity had all converged here. As I prepared to leave, I glanced at the maps and scrolls one last time. The network of secrets extended far beyond Oak Island. The world was full of hidden truths, and I had glimpsed just one. But I also understood the responsibility that came with it. This knowledge was powerful. It could illuminate history or be misused. With the artifacts secured, I began my ascent back toward the surface. The journey had changed me. I had faced danger, deception, and centuries of secrets. I had uncovered Sinclair's land beyond, survived its trials, and understood the true weight of history. Oak Island's dark past was no longer just a mystery. It was a responsibility I now carried. The ascent from the land beyond felt heavier than the descent. Every step carried the weight of centuries of secrets, knowledge, and responsibility. The underground chambers, puzzles, and trials seemed to hum faintly as if acknowledging my survival. I clutched the orb, journal, and scrolls close, aware that these were more than relics. They were the embodiment of Sinclair's journey, and now my own. Emerging from the final tunnel, the air felt different. The forest outside seemed quieter, almost reverent, as though Oak Island itself recognized the significance of what had transpired beneath its surface. The fog hung low, curling around the trees, softening the harsh outlines of reality. For the first time, I truly understood the island's duality. It was both a keeper of secrets and a test of human resolve. I paused and looked back toward the entrance to the hidden chambers. The intruder was nowhere in sight. Their presence had been a silent guide, a guardian ensuring that only those worthy could proceed. Their warning echoed in my mind: protect it, respect it, reveal it wisely. I realized that Oak Island had not just tested my courage or intellect, it had tested my integrity. The path back to civilization was long, but my mind was alive with the knowledge I had uncovered. The maps, scrolls, and artifacts were more than historical relics. They were keys to understanding a network of secrets the world had forgotten or ignored. I thought of Sinclair and the centuries he had devoted to the pursuit of this truth. His journey had ended mysteriously, but mine had continued where his had paused. As I made my way through the forest, I reflected on the lessons of the land beyond. Every trial, every puzzle, every shadowy guardian had taught me patience, respect, and focus. The Templars had hidden knowledge not out of greed, but out of responsibility. They had left behind warnings, mechanisms, and guardians for a reason. Only those capable of understanding the depth of their legacy could access it safely. I reached the edge of the island, where the waves lapped against the rocks with a constant, hypnotic rhythm. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows over the landscape. I held the orb up and watched the light refract through its carvings, revealing patterns in the waves and the forest that I had never noticed before. It was a quiet, humbling reminder that the journey was not just about discovery. It was about perception, awareness, and respect. Returning to civilization, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and caution. The knowledge I had uncovered was powerful, fragile, and potentially dangerous if misunderstood. Sinclair's legacy was no longer a mystery. It was a responsibility. I could feel the presence of the island's guardians even from afar, as if Oak Island itself had ensured that only those prepared could leave with its truths. That night, I documented everything carefully. Every map, symbol, artifact, and lesson was recorded in a secure place, ensuring that the knowledge would be preserved without risking misuse. I reflected on the notion of karma, the careful balance of action and consequence that seemed to govern Oak Island itself. Sinclair's journey had been a testament to this principle, and mine now was too. As I looked out over the dark waters, I realized that Oak Island's dark past was not just about hidden treasures or mysterious disappearances. It was about legacy, responsibility, and the courage to pursue truth despite danger. The land beyond had tested me in every way possible, and I had survived. But the island, with all its secrets, would always endure. It would continue to challenge, to teach, and to protect its hidden knowledge, waiting for those capable of understanding its lessons. And as the night deepened, I felt a quiet reverence for the Templars, Sinclair, and the countless souls who had ventured into Oak Island's darkness before me. Some had failed. Some had vanished. But the knowledge endured, and now, in my hands, it had a chance to continue its legacy. I knew one thing for certain. Oak Island had changed me. Not just by what I had discovered, but by what I had learned about patience, respect, and the power of hidden truths. The land beyond was real, Sinclair's secrets were alive, and the lessons of history were more profound than I could have imagined. As I turned to leave the island behind, the fog thickened, curling around me like a living entity. I walked away, but the hum of the land beyond echoed in my mind. Oak Island's dark past had been revealed, but its guardians, its trials, and its secrets would always endure, a silent, eternal testament to those brave enough to seek the truth.